Flight attendant destroys black girl's pills. 5 minutes later, her father grounds the plane. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The cabin was calm in that artificial way airplanes always are before takeoff. Overhead bins clicked shut. A safety video murmured through the speakers. Passengers settled into their seats, already half absent, half expecting nothing more dramatic than a delayed departure. Then, a child's voice broke through it. "Please, I need that." Heads turned. In the middle row, a little black girl, no more than 7, stood trembling beside her seat. Her pink shirt was wrinkled from gripping it too hard. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she reached both hands forward, palms open, begging. Across from her stood a flight attendant, white, mid-30s, posture rigid, uniform pressed to perfection. In her hand was a small blister pack of pills. She examined it with narrowed eyes, as if it were evidence instead of medicine. The girl sobbed louder. "Please, that's mine." The flight attendant didn't lower her voice. She didn't kneel. She didn't soften. Instead, she turned slightly so the surrounding passengers could hear her clearly. "These look like street drugs," she said flatly. "Not medicine." The words landed heavy. Sharp, final. A hush fell over the cabin, not silence, but the kind of quiet that comes when people sense something is wrong and don't yet know whether they'll be forced to acknowledge it. The girl's knees buckled. She clutched the armrest, gasping between sobs. Her small fingers shook, still reaching for the pills that were now being held just out of reach. "Please," she cried again, voice cracking. "I need those." Some passengers stared openly. Others looked away. A man 2 rows back frowned, then glanced down at his phone, choosing distance over involvement. The flight attendant sighed, impatient now. "You need to sit down," she said. "You're causing a disruption." That's when the father spoke. He had been seated the entire time, calm almost to the point of stillness. A black man in his early 40s, dressed simply dark jacket, no visible logos, no outward markers of status. The kind of man most people glance past without remembering. "Those are her prescription pills," he said quietly. "Give them back." His tone wasn't aggressive. It wasn't pleading either. It was measured, controlled. The flight attendant looked at him for the first time, really looked. Her eyes flicked from his face to his clothes, then back again. "We'll determine that," she replied. "For now, these are being confiscated." The word confiscated echoed in the girl's ears. Her crying turned panicked, desperate. She clutched her father's sleeve, burying her face against his arm. "I don't feel good," she whispered. "Daddy, I don't feel good." He placed one steady hand on her back, grounding her, then looked up again. "Mayam," he said, just as calm as before. "That medication keeps my daughter stable. You're putting her at risk." A few nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. No one moved. The flight attendant straightened, authority settling into her stance like armor. "Sir, if you continue to interfere, I'll have to notify the captain." The father nodded once, slowly, as if filing the moment away. "Do what you need to do," he replied. The girl's cries echoed down the aisle. The blister pack remained in the attendant's hand, untouched, unquestioned its legitimacy, dismissed the moment it belonged to a child who didn't look like she deserved the benefit of doubt. And as the aircraft door remained open, engines humming softly in the background, something far more dangerous than turbulence had already entered the cabin. This was only the beginning. The father didn't stand up right away. He stayed seated, one arm wrapped around his daughter as she trembled against him, her sobs muffled now by the fabric of his jacket. His other hand rested flat on his knee, fingers still, disciplined like a man holding something back on purpose. Around them, the cabin resumed its uneasy rhythm. Someone coughed. A seatbelt clicked. The world tried to pretend this was just another minor inconvenience before takeoff. It wasn't. The flight attendant turned away from them, already signaling to another crew member down the aisle. Her voice dropped into that rehearsed professional tone. controlled, rehearsed, detached. "Captain may need to be informed," she said. "Possible violation of safety protocol." Protocol. The father exhaled slowly through his nose. He'd heard that word before. Too many times. It was always the word used when people didn't want to say what they were really thinking. His daughter lifted her head just enough to look at him. Her eyes were glossy, unfocused. Fear sat in them heavier than the tears. "Daddy," she whispered, barely audible. "I feel dizzy." That did it. He looked up again, locking eyes with the attendant. His voice didn't rise, but something in it changed like steel settling into place. "She has a diagnosed condition," he said. "That medication is prescribed. You don't get to decide whether my child needs it." The attendant's jaw tightened. "Sir, I told you this is airline policy." "Then your policy is wrong." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the nearby rows. Someone had finally said it out loud. The attendant stiffened. "Sir, if you continue—" "I am continuing," he interrupted calmly. "Because my daughter is getting worse while you're standing there holding what keeps her safe." For the first time, the attendant hesitated. Not because she believed him, but because other people were watching now. A woman across the aisle leaned forward slightly, concern written across her face. A teenage boy paused his video game, eyes darting between the child and the pills. Even the man who'd looked away earlier glanced back, guilt flickering across his expression. The father noticed all of it. He always did. He had learned long ago that silence made people comfortable, but visibility made them nervous. "Sir," the attendant said again, this time louder, "please remain seated. You are escalating the situation." He looked down at his daughter. Her breathing was shallow now, uneven. She clutched his sleeve like it was the only solid thing left in the world. He thought of another room. Years ago, a hospital waiting area, white walls, a nurse holding a clipboard, asking him again if he was sure the medication belonged to his child. "Are you sure it's hers? Are you sure you didn't mix it up? Are you sure she really needs it?" Always sure. Never believed. He looked back up. "You took that from her without checking," he said evenly. "No doctor, no verification, just a decision. No doctor." The attendant crossed her arms. "Sir, I don't have to justify my actions to you." That sentence landed harder than she realized. A quiet murmur rolled through the cabin. Not outrage yet, but discomfort. The kind that comes right before people are forced to choose sides. The father nodded once, slowly. "You're right," he said. "You don't." It stated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The motion alone drew attention. Phones always did. They meant documentation. Escalation. Consequences. The attendant scoffed softly. "Recording isn't allowed." "I'm not recording," he replied. He unlocked the screen, tapped a contact, and brought the phone to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was low, controlled, precise. "Yes," he said, "it's happening now." A pause. Then, "Yes, on the aircraft." Another pause. He glanced at the flight attendant, who was suddenly watching him far more closely than before. "Hold the plane," he said into the phone. "We're not going anywhere yet." He ended the call. The engines continued to hum. The cabin lights stayed the same. Nothing looked different. But something had shifted. The father leaned back slightly, tightening his arm around his daughter as if to shield her from what was coming next. The flight attendant opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Because for the first time since this began, she wasn't sure who was actually in control. The cabin no longer felt neutral. It felt watched. Whispers crept in from the rows behind them, soft at first, then careless. Why would a child even have pills like that? People sneak stuff on planes all the time. They're just doing their job. Each sentence landed somewhere between curiosity and accusation. None of them asked the obvious question. None of them asked why a crying child needed to prove anything at all. The flight attendant took a step back, then another, as if widening the space between herself and the father restored authority. She lifted her intercom phone and spoke in a clipped tone meant to sound procedural. "Cabin crew to cockpit," she said. "We have a situation." The word situation floated through the air, vague and dangerous. The father didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply held his daughter as her breathing grew more uneven, her small chest rising too fast, then slowing, then speeding again. "Daddy," she murmured. "My head hurts." He pressed his forehead gently against hers, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I know. I've got you. Stay with me." Across the aisle, a woman in her late 20s leaned forward, unable to look away anymore. She glanced at the pills in the attendant's hand, then at the child's face, pale now, lips trembling. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "Shouldn't you at least check the label?" The flight attendant turned sharply. "Mom, please stay in your seat." "I'm just saying," the woman replied, voice shaking but firm. "That looks like a prescription pack." Another attendant appeared near the galley, alerted by the call. He took in the scene quickly, the crying child, the standing attendant, the father with his phone still in his hand. "What's going on?" he asked. "Possible unauthorized medication," the first attendant answered immediately. "We're handling it." "Unauthorized." The second attendant hesitated, eyes flicking to the child. "She's pretty young." "Exactly," came the reply, which makes this more concerning. The implication hung there, ugly and unspoken. The father looked up. "Concerning to who?" he asked. "Because my concern is that my daughter is about to have a medical episode." The second attendant shifted his weight. "Sir, have you informed us of any medical needs prior to boarding?" "Yes," the father replied, "at check-in, and again, at the gate." The attendant frowned. "I don't see that noted." "Then someone didn't do their job," the father said calmly. "But that doesn't give you the right to punish my child for it." The flight attendant scoffed under her breath. "Sir, lower your voice. I haven't raised it." And he hadn't. That was what made people uneasy. The girl let out a small cry, clutching at her chest now. Panic rippled through the nearby rows. A man stood halfway, unsure whether to help or sit back down. "This is ridiculous," someone muttered. "Why isn't anyone helping the kid?" another whispered. The flight attendant's grip tightened around the pills. "Captain will decide," she said, as if that ended the discussion. The father nodded again. "Good." He glanced at his phone, which buzzed once in his hand. He didn't look at it yet. Instead, he looked around the cabin at the faces now openly watching, at the ones pretending not to, at the ones who suddenly realized this was no longer a private matter. "Listen carefully," he said, not loud, but clear. "If something happens to my daughter while you delay, every second of it will be on record. He has techned." The second attendant swallowed. "Sir, you're already late," the father continued, "and you know it." The cockpit door remained closed. The engines continued their low hum. But the sense of forward motion, the assumption that this flight would simply take off, was gone. The flight attendant finally turned toward the galley, speaking sharply into her headset. "We need guidance now." As she walked away, still holding the pills, the girl reached out weakly after her. "Please," she whispered, one last time. The word echoed in the silence she left behind. The father watched the attendant disappear behind the curtain. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in resolve. He looked down at his phone. The response had come in. And whatever the crew thought they were managing, the situation had already moved beyond them. The curtain to the galley swayed slightly as the flight attendant disappeared behind it. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The girl's cries had softened into something worse thin, strained breaths that came too fast, then stalled, then rushed again. Her small body leaned heavily into her father's chest now, as if the strength to sit upright was slipping away. He adjusted her gently, keeping his voice low. "Stay with me. Look at me." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. That was when someone stood up. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. A woman 2 rows back, early 30s, hair pulled into a loose bun, wearing scrubs beneath a light jacket, stepped into the aisle. Her hands were open, palms visible, the universal gesture of someone not looking for trouble. "I'm a nurse," she said quietly. "May I take a look at her?" The second attendant turned toward her immediately. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." The nurse didn't move. "That child is showing signs of distress. I don't need her chart to see that." A ripple moved through the cabin. Heads leaned closer now, phones lowered, attention sharpened. The father met the nurse's eyes and nodded once. "Permission." "She needs her medication," the nurse continued. "And she needs it now." The attendant hesitated. "Just for a fraction of a second." That's not your call, he replied. We're waiting on the captain. Then the captain should hurry, the nurse said, firmer now, because if something happens, waiting won't be a defense. A man across the aisle cleared his throat. She's right, he muttered. The kid looks bad. Another voice followed. Why are they even taking medicine from a child? The second attendant raised his voice slightly, trying to regain control. Everyone, please remain seated. We're handling the situation. Handling it. The phrase drew a quiet, humorless smile from the father. You've been handling it for 10 minutes, he said, and my daughter is getting worse. The nurse knelt beside the aisle seat now, careful not to touch the child without permission. She spoke softly, directly to the girl. Sweetheart, can you tell me your name? A whisper, barely audible. Okay, the nurse said gently. You're doing great. Just keep breathing with me. She looked up at the attendant. This isn't theoretical anymore. The galley curtain rustled again. The first flight attendant returned, still holding the blister pack. Her expression was tight, controlled, but no longer confident. The captain has been notified, she announced. Until further instruction, the medication remains secured. Braques, Capic. Secured from who? The nurse snapped. From a child who needs it? Nurse. The attendant bristled. Mom, step back. Before the nurse could respond, another voice cut in smaller, younger. I saw the label. One. Everyone turned. A junior flight attendant, barely out of training, badge still too shiny, stood near the rear galley. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. I helped clean that row earlier, she said. I saw the blister pack when they boarded. It has her name on it. The cabin froze. The senior attendant spun around. That's not relevant. It is, the trainee replied, swallowing hard. It's a prescription. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that forms right before authority cracks. The father didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The nurse rose slowly to her feet. You heard her. The senior attendant's face flushed. She's mistaken. I'm not, the trainee said quickly. I remember it because it had cartoon stickers on the label. Is money dependent? A murmur spread, the kind that no longer questioned the child but the crew. The father finally spoke again, voice calm, unmistakably steady. Now, he said, you have confirmation. You have a witness, and you have a child in distress. He met the senior attendant's eyes. What you don't have, he continued, is time. The captain still hadn't appeared. The pills were still not returned. But the room had changed. This was no longer one father against a system. The system had been seen. And once people see the truth, silence is no longer neutral. The girl's head lolled gently against her father's chest. Not asleep. Not calm. Just tired in a way no child should ever be. Her breathing stuttered, 2 short inhales, 1 shaky exhale. Her fingers twitched weakly against his sleeve, no longer gripping, just searching. Daddy, she murmured. It's getting dark. That sentence cut deeper than any insult. The nurse reached for her stethoscope instinctively, then stopped herself. She's not okay, she said quietly. She needs that medication now. The senior flight attendant's jaw clenched. She looked toward the cockpit door again, as if waiting for authority to rescue her from the moment. We're not administering anything without clearance, she said. This is for everyone's safety. Safety. The father felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not panic. Recognition. He had heard that word before, too. Years ago, in a different room. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor. His daughter was 4 then, her legs dangling above the tile as she sat on a hospital bed. A nurse had stood at the door, arms crossed, reading the chart twice. Are you sure these aren't too strong for her? Are you sure she actually takes this? Are you sure you didn't mix them up? Always sure. Never trusted. He remembered how his daughter had looked at him, then confused, frightened, learning for the first time that needing help didn't guarantee receiving it. Back in the cabin, her breathing hitched sharply. A small whimper escaped her lips. The father looked up. This ends now, he said. The senior attendant stiffened. Sir, sit down. I am sitting down, he replied. You're the one standing between my child and her medication. 8. The trainee flight attendant took a half step forward, then stopped, fear and conviction battling on her face. She really doesn't look good. she said softly. The senior attendant snapped. Enough! She turned, raised the blister pack slightly and without warning, pressed her thumb hard into one of the pockets. A sharp crack. The pill crushed inside the plastic. A collective gasp ripped through the cabin. The nurse's eyes widened. What are you doing? Securing it, the attendant replied, voice tight, defensive. This medication is now compromised. The father froze. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single crushed pill. White powder trapped in plastic. Useless. Destroyed. Then his daughter cried out, not loud, not dramatic, but broken. No, she whimpered. That's mine. The sound tore through the cabin like glass. The father stood up. Slowly, deliberately. Not in a rush. Not in rage. Every movement measured. You just crossed a line, he said quietly. The attendant lifted her chin. Sir, step back. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward her. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again. The cabin watched. Not whispered now. Watched. He tapped the screen once, put it to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was calm enough to be terrifying. Phase 2, he said. Yes, she destroyed it. A pause. No, not later. Now. The dazzled. He lowered the phone and looked directly at the senior attendant. You took medicine from a child, he said. Then you destroyed it. That is no longer policy. That is liability. Her confidence faltered. Just slightly. The captain's voice crackled faintly from behind the cockpit door, muffled but urgent. Footsteps followed. The nurse placed a steady hand on the father's arm. She needs help, she said, immediately. I know, he replied. He knelt back down beside his daughter, cupping her face gently. Look at me, he whispered. I'm here. She nodded weakly. Around them, the cabin had changed completely. No one looked away now. No one scrolled. No one whispered excuses. They were watching a line being crossed, and they knew it. The cockpit door handle turned, and whatever authority the crew thought they held was about to be tested by something far stronger than uniforms or policy. Truth. The cockpit door opened. Not fully, just enough to reveal the captain's shoulder, his hand gripping the edge like he'd walked into something heavier than turbulence. What's going on? He asked, eyes already scanning the scene. The crying child, the standing father, the nurse in the aisle, the crushed pill still trapped in plastic. The senior flight attendant spoke first. Captain, we had an issue with unauthorized medication. We followed protocol. Who is an A? The word protocol sounded smaller now, thinner. The father didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He lowered himself back into his seat beside his daughter, pulling her close, shielding her from the room. He looked at his phone instead. Another vibration. Another message. He unlocked it, glanced once, then placed it face down on the tray table between him and the aisle. Deliberate. Visible. Captain, he said calmly, before anyone says anything else, I need you to understand something. The captain turned fully toward him now. My daughter's medication was confiscated without verification, the father continued. Then it was destroyed. You have witnesses, a nurse, a member of your own crew. The trainee flight attendant nodded quickly, fear and relief mixing in her eyes. The captain frowned. Is that accurate? No one answered immediately. That silence was the answer. The senior attendant straightened. Captain, we were acting in the interest of safety. The father tilted his head slightly. Then explain how crushing a child's prescription improves safety. The captain's jaw tightened. The nurse spoke again, her voice steady but sharp. She needs care now, not debate. The father picked up his phone again, not rushed, not emotional. Phase 3, he said quietly into it. Yes, bring operations on the line. He didn't look at the crew when he said it. He looked at his daughter. Stay with me, he whispered. Just breathe. The cabin lights hummed softly overhead. The engines idled. Time stretched. Then his phone rang. He tapped speaker. This is Executive Flight Operations, a voice said, crisp, unmistakably corporate. We're holding all departures associated with this aircraft. A ripple tore through the cabin. The captain's eyes widened. Holding this flight? Yes, the voice replied. Effective immediately. The senior attendant took a step back. Captain. The father raised one finger. Not to silence. to signal patience. "There's more," he said into the phone. "Medication destruction. Minor involved. Medical witness present." A pause. Then, "Understood. Do not close the aircraft door." The father ended the call. The engines powered down. The sound was subtle but final. The captain stared at the instrument panel, then back at the father. "Sir, who exactly am I speaking with?" The father didn't answer right away. He leaned down, brushed his daughter's hair back gently, then looked up. "Someone who doesn't need to raise his voice," he said, "because the system is already listening." Around them, passengers sat frozen. No phones now, no whispers, just the awareness that this flight was no longer routine. The captain took a slow breath. "Everyone," he announced, voice steady but changed. "We will be remaining at the gate." The words echoed like a verdict. The father finally looked at the senior flight attendant, who now avoided his gaze. "You thought my silence meant compliance," he said evenly. "It didn't." Outside the window, the jet bridge remained locked in place. Inside the cabin, power had shifted, and the truth was no longer waiting its turn. The cabin felt smaller now, not physically but emotionally, as if the air itself had thickened, pressing against every chest, every thought. The engines were silent, the lights steady, and yet nothing felt stable anymore. The captain stood frozen in the aisle, one hand braced against a seatback. "Sir," he said carefully, "I need to understand who authorized that call." The father didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket instead and pulled out a slim leather wallet. Not rushed, not dramatic. He opened it once, calmly, and held it just high enough for the captain to see. An ID. Corporate. Executive. The captain's eyes scanned it, then widened. His posture changed instantly, shoulders straightening, voice dropping a register. "Mr. Carter." A collective intake of breath rippled through the cabin. The senior flight attendant stiffened, color draining from her face. "Captain?" The father slid the wallet back into his jacket and finally spoke the words that landed like a hammer. "You destroyed my daughter's medication," he said evenly, "on an aircraft owned by my company." Silence. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Even the nurse froze. The captain swallowed hard. "You're the shareholder?" "Majority," the father corrected quietly, "and chair of the Safety Oversight Board." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They sank. The senior flight attendant took a step back as if the floor had shifted beneath her. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "If I had known." "That," the father interrupted calmly, "is the problem." He turned slightly, just enough to let his voice carry. "You didn't know who I was," he said. "So you decided who my daughter was allowed to be." The cabin remained motionless. The trainee flight attendant's eyes filled with tears. Not fear, but realization. The captain cleared his throat. "Sir, we will correct this immediately." "You already can't," the father replied. "The medication was destroyed." He looked down at his daughter, who lay limp against him, exhausted but still breathing. "But you can be accountable." "Revive their head did?" He raised his phone again. "Put compliance on," he said. The line connected instantly. "Yes, Mr. Carter," a voice answered. "We're recording." "Good," he replied. "Then note this. A minor's prescription was confiscated and destroyed without medical verification. Witnesses include a licensed nurse and crew member. This aircraft is grounded until further notice." The captain nodded, stunned but compliant. The senior flight attendant's mouth opened. No sound came out. The father lowered the phone. Then, finally, he looked directly at her. "You thought this was about rules," he said quietly. "It was always about power." Outside the window, ground crew vehicles stopped moving. A gate supervisor approached the jet bridge. Inside the cabin, passengers slowly began to understand what they had just witnessed. Not a tantrum, not a misunderstanding, a reckoning. The father leaned back, holding his daughter close, his voice soft, now only for her. "You're safe," he whispered. "Daddy's got it." And for the first time since the ordeal began, the people who had questioned, doubted, and stayed silent realized something far more unsettling than turbulence had ever been at play. They hadn't just misjudged a man. They had underestimated authority that never needed to announce itself. Until now, the shift was immediate. Not loud, Not chaotic, but unmistakable. The captain straightened, no longer unsure, no longer negotiating. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of command. But this time it wasn't aimed at the passengers. "Purser," he said firmly, turning to the senior flight attendant, "step away from the aisle." Her lips parted. "Captain, I. Now. 40. She hesitated just long enough for everyone to notice. Then she obeyed, stepping back as if the floor itself no longer trusted her. The trainee flight attendant moved instinctively toward the father and child. "I'll get the medical kit," she said quickly. "Bring it," the captain replied, "and contact ground medical support." The nurse was already kneeling again, checking the child's pulse, her expression tight but focused. "She's exhausted," she said. "We need stabilization, and we need it soon." The father nodded once. "Help is coming." Outside the window, flashing amber lights appeared near the gate. A gate supervisor stood at the jet bridge, speaking urgently into a headset. The stillness of the airport beyond the glass made the grounded plane feel suddenly exposed, like a spotlight had been turned on. The senior flight attendant stood frozen near the galley, arms wrapped tightly around herself now. Her confidence had collapsed inward, folding under the realization that every decision she'd made was being documented, replayed, preserved. A chime sounded overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain announced, "this flight will be delayed. Please remain seated." Tacta better. No groans. No complaints. Just quiet. Passengers looked at one another differently now, some with shame, some with anger, some with something close to awe. A man across the aisle finally spoke. "She was just a kid," he said softly, as if realizing it for the first time. "Yes," the nurse replied without looking up. "She was." The trainee returned with the medical kit, hands steady despite her pale face. She avoided the senior attendant's gaze entirely. Ground medical staff appeared at the aircraft door moments later, ushered in quickly, efficiently. They moved with purpose, professionalism, no questions wasted. The father stepped back just enough to give them space, never letting go of his daughter's hand. One of the medics glanced at the crushed blister pack still clutched in the senior attendant's hand. His expression hardened. "Who did this?" he asked. No one answered. They didn't need to. The captain spoke instead. "It's being handled." The senior flight attendant was escorted toward the front of the plane, now not roughly, not dramatically, but unmistakably removed from control. A supervisor met her at the jet bridge, speaking in low, urgent tones. Her badge was unclipped. The sound was small, plastic on fabric, but it echoed. The child's breathing finally began to slow, steadying under the medic's care. Color returned to her face in faint traces. The father exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Around them, the cabin remained silent, not stunned anymore, but changed. This wasn't about delays, or inconvenience, or policy. This was about watching power unravel in real time. Not through shouting or spectacle, but through consequences. The father looked once more toward the front of the plane, where the senior attendant had disappeared from view. Then, he looked down at his daughter. And in that moment, the collapse was complete, not just of authority, but of the illusion that silence and uniforms could ever outrank truth. The cabin didn't return to normal. It couldn't, even after the medics finished stabilizing the child, even after the supervisor confirmed the flight was officially grounded, even after the senior flight attendant was escorted off the aircraft and out of sight. Something fundamental had shifted. The father remained seated, his daughter resting quietly against him now, an oxygen mask gently secured, her breathing finally even. One of the medics nodded reassuringly. "She's stable," he said. "We'll transfer her inside, but she's going to be okay." The father closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in relief, but in release. Then he opened them again and thanked the medic softly. Around them, passengers watched in silence. Not the awkward silence from before, but a respectful one. The kind that comes after witnessing something irreversible. The captain stood at the front of the cabin, hands clasped behind his back, posture formal. "Mr. Carter," he said, "on behalf of the airline." The father raised one hand gently. "This isn't about apologies," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "This is about what happens when people decide who deserves care," he continued. "Who deserves patience? Who deserves belief?" Wart. He looked around the cabin slowly, meeting eyes one by one. My daughter didn't need special treatment, he said. She needed the same assumption of innocence every other child gets without asking. A few passengers lowered their heads. She was treated like a risk, he went on. Not because of what she carried, but because of who she is. No one argued. No one interrupted. The captain nodded once, solemn. A full investigation will be conducted. Good, the father replied, because this doesn't end here. He glanced down at his daughter, brushing her hair back gently. You all saw what happened, he said, and what you do with that matters. The nurse stood quietly nearby, eyes glistening. The trainee flight attendant wiped her cheeks, standing a little taller than before. The father's phone buzzed again. He checked it briefly, then stood carefully, lifting his daughter into his arms with practiced ease. As he stepped into the aisle, the passengers parted instinctively, making space without being asked. Just before reaching the door, he paused and turned back one last time. I didn't raise my voice today, he said calmly. I raised the standard. The words settled into the cabin like a final verdict. As he exited the aircraft with his daughter and the medical team, the jet bridge echoed with quiet footsteps. Outside, the airport continued its endless motion, but that plane would not move until every question was answered. Inside the cabin, no one reached for their phones. No one complained about the delay. They sat with the truth instead. Because justice hadn't arrived with sirens or shouting. It arrived with composure, clarity, and a father who refused to let silence decide his child's worth. And that lesson stayed behind long after the doors closed.